Welcome to Open Studio on Cape Town TV. Good day, everybody. My name is Ashley Brandt, and with me today I have the phenomenal Nina Brazo, who's here today to tell us about a non-profit organization that she started. Nina, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How are you feeling?
Good.
Awesome. It's nice to have you here. Nina, you have a diverse and a rich culture background, and you grew up, you were born in London with your Sicilian parents. Tell us about what was it like as a child with such a diverse background?
Well, I feel really lucky because my grandparents on my father's side are from Sicily. So when I go to their house, it's like going to Little Sicily. And with all of their passion and emotion, and we used to play opera in the background, or just the food and the interior. It was like entering a little different world. And my mother's background is English, and again we have the different influence from her parents and grandparents coming from East Ham, East London. And in the area that I grew up in, it has lots of different nationalities and faiths, and the schools that I went to too. And the kind of personality that me and my siblings have is that we like to find out about different cultures, try different food, listen to different music, and find out these different perspectives. Wow. And so I feel really lucky that I grew up in a melting pot, and I was exposed to that from a young age, and it made me quite a curious, adventurous type of person. And I would go to different parts of my neighbourhood or London, which maybe the typical person wouldn't, but I had more, for me, enriching life through doing so.
Listen, that's amazing. Listen, you obviously, on a later stage, you studied photography, which led you to travel around the world. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I went to university in Southampton, which is in the south of England. Yeah. And as a part of my degree, I had a scholarship in Venice. Now, Venice is absolutely beautiful. If anybody has been there, it's like an outdoor museum.
I can
and
imagine.
I lived the life of an artist for 5 months. And although my heritage, you would think that I speak Italian, I only learnt a little bit at university, and I still was immersing myself into another culture, another world. And that really gave me the taste for travel. You know, how do you buy a ticket and go to a place that you've never been to before? And all of the problem solving and adventure of what you have, that planted the seed for me wanting to travel around the world. Wow. So when I graduated from university, I noticed that that experience of studying abroad also enriched my photographic practice. And after a year and a half, about 2 years of me working for international companies in London, I did my trip around the world for 2.5 years. So it was actually supposed to be only 1 year, and it would start in Rio de Janeiro, end in Mumbai in India. Okay. But actually it ended up turning into 2.5 years. So from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, I went through Latin America, Australia, New Zealand, and then I went from Indonesia up through to Malaysia, Thailand, Borneo, Hong Kong, China, to India and Nepal. And then South Africa seemed to complete the jigsaw of finish where I started. Because obviously as I travelled, I learnt more about world history, ancient history, and how certain lands were joined together millions of years ago. And so not only were the lands of Brazil and South Africa joined, but also the people in the way that they look and the landscapes are very similar. And so I finished in Cape Town.
Wow. Now I'm listening to you, and you've obviously traveled a bit. Now your traveling has also led you to a spiritual way to life. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, my grandma was actually a nun. She grew up in a convent, and I grew up with many stories of miracles that happened in her life. She was blind, and then she prayed to St. Anthony for miracles, and then she could see, and there's so many stories that I grew up with my grandma, and she always would say she prayed for me. And she was going to stay in a monastery, well, a nunnery, as a nun. She did all of her novice training, and they have like 1 to 3 months to spend with the family before that time. And in that time, she met my granddad, and the rest is history, as they say, because then on their honeymoon, they went to England. It took them over 2 weeks to travel with all of their belongings. And but my grandma always prayed for me. She always said she would pray for me. And also on my mother's side, there was lots of nuns too. And I always grew up with stories about that. And so although both sides of my family are Roman Catholic, I wasn't baptised or christened or lived in a certain way.
Okay.
And one of the advantages, as I said, of being in a melting pot, I could learn about different faiths. One of the things that always stood with me in my religious studies class is one of the homeworks once was, if you met God, what would your question be? And for me, at the age of maybe 10, it's like, out of all of these different paths and ways to follow and worship you, which is the one? And travelling around the world was an extension of that. And obviously there's so many things, ways of life, lifestyles, ways to worship that I experienced. And if I just pinpoint some parts, like learning Vipassana meditation in North India, that really was transformational in my life. It was about, my travels were about emptying my cup.
Okay.
And so from emptying my cup, I could receive.
Wow.
And through learning about all the different faiths around the world, in Indonesia, here in the Adan, the call to prayer really touched me. I'd be in the middle of the jungle and in random places and hear the call to prayer, and it really had an effect on my heart. And yeah, it's really hard to summarise my whole trip, but basically actually in Cape Town was a place where the jigsaw came together, and it was a stormy night in Mully Point. I remember the sirens were going of the lighthouse and all of the waves were crashing into the roads. Very mystical night, and I was questioning myself about love and about the universe, one of those types of crazy nights. But at that point, I had the realisation that it was Islam, and that it made complete sense to me at that point, not only from a historical point of view, in joining all of the histories and all of the prophets and all of these people that have come, but also from a spiritual point of view of uniting the whole of humanity around the Kaaba.
Wow.
In that prayer that we do, it actually unites the whole of the world in circles and in ripples.
Wow. On that note, we're going to have to go on a break. We'll be back shortly. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Open Studio on Cape Town TV, and I'm Ashley Brandt, and I'm speaking to the phenomenal Nina Brazil, who's here to tell us about the non-profit organization that she started. Nina, you've traveled the world. How did you fall in love with South Africa?
Well, to be quite honest, as soon as I was flying here from India, I felt like I was coming home. And it was the strangest feeling because I'd been away from England where I was born for 2 years, but I just had this anticipation of excitement and nerves of coming to South Africa as if I was coming home. And as soon as I arrived in Joburg, is where I landed, I just felt like I'd arrived home. So I had this instant affinity with the land, and you know, there's just some kind of connection that I have with the people here where I just feel like I've met my people, and it's the only place that I ever get homesick from, actually. I didn't know what that was like before. And when I was just in Indonesia for 2.5 years, I was so homesick, I even thought of leaving my scholarship to just come back here. And my friends said I was crazy, but there's actually so much I miss. I mean, of course, the land is beautiful, and it's so creative, and it really inspires me, and it makes me feel alive. And you know, as an artist, I feel so stimulated, and I feel so excited to collaborate with all people from different backgrounds here. And yeah, I just feel like it's the ideal place for me. I also love fitness, and it's great for going for a run and doing exercise outside and adventure sports. So I feel like I wouldn't need to go anywhere else. I can do all of my adventure here and I'd be quite content.
That is awesome. That is phenomenal. You've learned a lot through your travels, and you decided to give back the knowledge you acquire through the arts.
Yes.
Please elaborate on that.
Yeah. Well, after me travelling for 2.5 years, in 2009, I really felt like I have to give back what I've learned. And at that time, I actually wasn't really sure what the vision would be. I would draw pictures and try to imagine what that was. And I did an arts management course, post-grad, to try and articulate how to organise theatre shows and design courses and workshops. And I got a commission from Brighton and Hove to actually run some of these workshop concepts. Wow. And this was the beginning of my professional development, of defining what my non-profit organisation would be. After several years of me going to Indonesia on a scholarship in 2011, and then me coming back here in 2011 as well, and developing my own art practice, the vision became clear that it was to bridge the gap between segregated communities as a result of apartheid. And it took me a while to get to that point because I think I was a little bit scared of the word apartheid. For me, it has lots of emotions that would bring up for me. Many ways that I feel I don't understand or agree, and it's very complex for me. But what I realised, it was about bringing people together, and the richness that it brings me in my life, and what I see the magic happening when people come together. That was the key, and trying to do that from a young age. And particularly in Cape Town, people still live quite separated in their communities, so it's trying to make ways to bring people together. And the arts is a great way to do that.
Phenomenal. Tell me, is there a link between South Africa and Indonesia, because you've spent a lot of time in both countries repeatedly?
Yes, yes. Well, it started off as just being very inspired by the traditional culture in Indonesia and understanding what the importance is of preserving traditional culture. But through learning more about the history, we go back to 300 years ago or so, and many political activists came here to South Africa via the VOC from Indonesia. So these people were scholars, princes, army generals, people of note that were, they couldn't be killed, and even when they were imprisoned, the Dutch were scared that they were going, there was lots of stories where people would escape, or there'd be mystery things that would happen. So they were worried that they needed to do something with these people. And so first of all, a lot of them went to Ceylon, and then afterwards they came to Cape Town. So the first wave of people that came to Cape Town were these amazing minds. And then there was many other waves of people that came here, and it's affected the language of Afrikaans, the food, the cuisine. Yes, definitely, there's many connections with the food, and I like finding the links. And the more that I learn about Indonesian language, the more I get to learn about not only Afrikaans, but the Cape way of speaking, and I love to find those links. Also with the characteristics and the mannerisms of people here. Through learning 2.5 years of the language and being in Indonesia and engaging with people from different cultural groups there, because there's hundreds of cultures there and ethnicities, I could pinpoint where the Indonesians, which Indonesians would have come to South Africa, because I could find in the way that people articulate themselves and the personalities, I could find them there. So it's actually helped me to understand the South African picture a lot better. And you'll find within the music and the arts, there are links there. And even with the spiritual practice of Islam, there's certain ways that we recite things that come from Indonesia, and there is that connection. So I get a bit of nostalgia when I'm in one place or the other through hearing some of these spiritual things that are recited. And then even if you zoom into something more recent, Nelson Mandela always wore batik shirts that came from Indonesia, and there was a connection there too. So actually there's many points in history that there is a connection, but it is a little bit being severed and not really recognised in the present day as much as it should be. So I learned batik, for example, and I want to teach people about the philosophy and the meaning behind all of the batiks. And that will also empower people with entrepreneurial ideas as well. So there's many ways that it will benefit South Africans.
Very, very much, and that's quite a link. That is quite a link. Tell us, what is the broken poetry piece about, and why is it so important for you to share that with the world?
Okay, so Broken
Just briefly.
is a very emotional poem about the domestic abuse that I experienced in my marriage whilst here in South Africa. So in the end of 2013, I left my husband, and how I left him was that he almost strangled me to death. And after that, I wrote this poem, and through sharing this poem was part of my cathartic.
Wow. On that note, we're going to get back to that, guys. We're going to go on a short break. We'll be back right now. Welcome back to Open Studio on Cape Town TV. Nina, we're going to go back to the broken poetry piece. Just tell us about that again.
Yes, so when I wrote this piece, the process was cathartic, and actually sharing it with only 3 people through a voice note, I actually was invited to share Broken at workshops for women that were at risk or had been abused. And through that, it was very difficult for me at first. It was through tears that I would share. But through that, I saw the power of sharing it, that so many people related to my story, and maybe they spoke about it for the first time. And then, bit by bit, I started sharing it more. And then I shared my piece for Mandela Day in 2015. And then I had musicians that would approach me, that they wanted to collaborate with me on that piece. And it grew. And then it became a piece that I performed for the launch of my NPO, which was in April 2016 at the District 6 Museum. And that we had a diverse group of rappers and poets, singers, musicians, and we all shared our story of abuse through different perspectives, and it became immensely powerful. And through this, I realised that we need to share our art, and I needed to share my story, and it built me as a person. It allowed me to heal through my spiritual path and through my creativity. And so that's how I started sharing my poetry.
Wow. It seems like you obviously believe in the power art for healing.
Yes.
Did that lead you to start the NPO Rahasia Mafiusa?
I think it kick-started it. You know, we have to count our blessings, that even in darkness, or sometimes what we perceive as bad things that happen to us, they actually, they trigger a change in our life and a big shift. And because I touched fate with death, I realised that, what am I doing here? This is really what I want to do. I came here because I wanted to make a change, and I want to contribute towards society with my passion and my talents and work with people. And this defining what it was, that's what drove me to understand, okay, what is the vision, what is the mission, what are the objectives, and how am I going to do this? Through photography, through poetry, music, and traditional Indonesian arts and culture. And that is the thing that's going to bring people together. And that's how I got awarded another 2 scholarships in Indonesia. And now I have this wealth of knowledge where in the Pancasila in Indonesia, the Pancasila was written for their independence, and it's respect people from different faiths and different cultural backgrounds, that everyone is living in Indonesia and is united in their diversity. And it, you know, it stimulates tolerance, because everybody knows their own culture, and so when they meet the next person, they're curious and they want to find out about them, but there's no insecurities there. So I want to celebrate that in South Africa.
Absolutely.
And the richness that we have here, and also teach people about Indonesian dance and music and batik and shadow puppets. And that's what I'm going to be doing with my non-profit organisation. Because Rahasia is an Indonesian word which means secret.
I was just about to ask you, yes.
And I love that word, Rahasia, and it means secret. And then Mafiusa is the root word of mafia. So when you say Sicily, a lot of people think mafia. When I started researching on actually what is mafia, I was shocked. I came to realise it means beauty, perfection, grace, and sheer excellence. And there's actually a whole story that I can tell you about this, but it'd be too long for right now. But it's to do with propaganda and spin doctors of the Italian government.
Powerful.
And every system, every powers has their own ways to spin doctor things. But now we find out the true meaning. And it also has an Arabic meaning, which means place of refuge. And so this would be the biggest compliment that you could give someone. If a woman was well turned out and she took care of her appearance and she had good character and she had beauty, perfection, grace and sheer excellence, she was molto mafia, and the kind of woman that you would want to marry.
Wow. Listen, I believe that you're going to be performing a piece for us
Yes.
today. Just elaborate quickly what it's going to be about.
So it's called I Didn't Know I Could Love Again. So after being broken, it's celebrating that it is possible to fall in love again and have that beautiful feeling.
Guys, we'll be watching Nina as she'll be performing us a wonderful piece of her poetry. Stay tuned. Well, guys, we have the phenomenal Nina Brazzo, and she will be performing her wonderful piece called I Didn't Know I Can Love Again. And on that note, guys, thank you for watching us on Open Studio. I'm Ashley Brandt. Until next time, God bless and goodbye. Nina, take it away.
Didn't know I could love again. A relief, my heart is open again. Like flowers blossoming, I feel I'm falling again. This time it's darkness into light. I feel like Nora expanding. This time it's light. I'm flying to be around you. The rebirth of a crushed heart. I fell from the highest of heights, shattered. I was completely broken. But now I feel those flutterbies expanding my soul, fluff, fluff, filling my very being. Isn't it sweet how a heart can break a man? Isn't it sweet how a heart can break a man, break a man? Seems falling in love never gets old. Suppose I didn't grow hard and cold. Just when I thought I couldn't float again, you have become my buoyancy. Like an old true friend, souls have met before. We can be rekindled in this life or the next. Alhamdulillah for what this brings. Even it's a show why a caged bird sings, a lily pad stepping stone, or nature's flow in the ocean. How sweet, how a heart can break a man. Isn't it sweet, how a heart can break a man, break a man. This time it's support and inspiration to be the best woman I can be. A celebration of clean, open heart chemistry. When the universe responds, it's a mystery. But I will keep sailing, forth with adventurous spirit, where majestic souls make connections. May the wings of the heart soar to a place of light. Onwards and upwards, the stars are shining.